Welcome back, fancy lords and ladies. I am your host, the Fanciest Man of Cornwood, and today we are doing a deck tech on a deck that was again voted on by the community. Thank you so much, everyone that took the time to come in and vote, and thank you for voting for this deck tech in particular, because I'm excited to just throw another commander at this strategy. It's really one that's kind of become a favorite of mine over the years, just to tinker with and kind of have fun with. So without further ado, tonight's commander is Breya, Etherium Shaper. This is a 4/4 legendary artifact creature human for white, blue, black, and red. And when Breya enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. She also has an activated ability where you can pay 2, sacrifice 2 artifacts, and choose 1. Breya deals 3 damage to target player. Target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, or you gain 5 life. So, we're going to dive right into our strategy overview. This is a Polymorph deck, and this is one of those strategies that I don't generally see a lot. I don't think it's a super mainstream strategy, but it's just so much fun to fill your deck with these big, kind of splashy creatures and just turn your little tokens into gigantic pieces for your board. We have a lot of different tools to try and help speed that along. We have a lot of different ways to make tokens that we can then sacrifice. And we always want to have lots of versatility in our deck, and luckily this is a theme that lends itself to versatility. So let's go straight into our next thing here. For this one, I've put just 4 examples here of kind of the big creatures that are going to be in our deck. One really important thing with the Polymorph deck is generally you don't want to have many, if any, creatures in your deck that aren't your targets to Polymorph, because what you're going to be doing is just flipping over cards until you get to a creature, and you want to make sure when you get to that creature that it's one that's really going to have a big presence on the board or do something big when it comes in. We have 4 examples here, and they're all, I think, pretty good examples of that. The first one is Agent of Treachery. For 5 and 2 blue, this is a 2/3 creature human rogue, and when it enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. That's crazy. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. So it's unlikely we'll trigger that last ability, but it is possible. We do have a teleportation circle in the deck to just give us some ETBs. You know, obviously our commander has her enters the battlefield ability, which is going to give us more and more tokens to kind of feed to these polymorph effects. So yeah, I like Agent of Treachery. It's always, you know, a big play. There's almost always something on the battlefield that's going to make this really worth swinging a game and just kind of swinging a board state as well. The next example is Angelic Aberration. This is a newer card for 5 and a white. We get a 4/4 creature Eldrazi Angel with Devoid, so it doesn't have a color. It doesn't really matter in this deck. It has flying and vigilance, and when Angelic Aberration enters, sacrifice any number of creatures, each with base power or toughness 1 or less. Create that many 4/4 colorless Eldrazi Angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance. All right, so obviously, you know, any tokens that have been made by our commander that are still kind of hanging around on our board, when this comes down, we can immediately just upgrade to these 4/4 Eldrazi Angel tokens. We have lots of token makers in the deck. You'll see that with the last example here, but there's also just passive token creation that's going to give us 1/1s, or usually we're going to have something to at least double the power that we're adding to our board, and that's kind of the goal with Angelic Aberration, if nothing else. But you know, there's lots of times where we'll also have multiple 1/1s, multiple ways to add 4/4 bodies to the board. And in those situations, it's going to feel pretty amazing to just drop this out of nowhere. All right, our next example is Grave Titan. This is a classic for 4, 2 black. You get a 6/6 creature giant with Death Touch, and whenever Grave Titan enters or attacks, create 2 black zombie creature tokens. So obviously this makes those creature tokens that we can just continue running our engine with. We can polymorph them into other things. It's also nice that it has an attack trigger because it's such an imposing body. You know, this card's just kind of holds up over time, because a 6/6 Death Touch is just kind of never bad. It's not really a bad thing to add to your board anytime. It's usually a good attacker for at least one opponent, if not multiple. So yeah, I just love the way that this synergizes with Polymorph, and it's just a really solid body to add to our board. And then our last example here is Sanctuary Warden. For 4 and 2 white, this is a 5/5 creature angel soldier with flying, and when Sanctuary Warden enters, it enters with 2 shield counters on it. And also, when it enters or attacks, you can remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker you control. If you do, draw a card and create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So again, this is another card that will come down. We do have to wait a turn to get both of these, card draw triggers and 1/1 citizens, but we get to do it once right away, which does feed into our next Polymorph spell. And having that shield counter just to protect itself is always nice, but what we love is that we're polymorphing, drawing a card, and getting a token in play for our next polymorph if we need that. All right, so let's look at some of the ways we're going to add even more tokens to our board. And what I'm hoping shows through here is just how creative and kind of flexible your token creation can be, especially when you're running all 4 of these colors, which Breya is able to do. You saw Bitter Blossom on the strategy overview. That's a 2-mana enchantment that will just pump out a token every upkeep. We, of course, like that. We also have, however, these examples. I'll start with Access Denied for 3 and 2 blue. This is an instant with counter target spell. Create X colorless, 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. So obviously we want to save this for a bigger spell if possible, but the nice thing about running this in our deck is that even if we only get let's say 3 of these 1/1 Thopter tokens, if nothing else, we look at that as 3 opportunities to polymorph. We have spells that are going to look for more than one target at a time to do that. So yeah, even just getting 2 or 3, it's not a bad floor. And then on the higher end, obviously, you could be looking at a lot of tokens with this card, maybe even 5 or 6. And it's just always nice to have flying tokens to get in and deal that last bit of damage, if nothing else. So the next example of the versatile ways that we can make tokens is Burn Down the House. For 3 and 2 red, this is a sorcery. Choose 1. Burn Down the House deals 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Or you can create 3 1/1 red devil creature tokens with, when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. They gain haste until end of turn. So it's just a really nice option to have as a board wipe, especially considering that even though this will take out some of our kind of polymorph targets, a lot of our targets either have more than 5 toughness or they have ways to survive that hit even at 5 toughness, kind of like the Sanctuary Warden that we looked at. So yeah, just really nice to have a flexible spell that can do either one and do them at the time we need them. If we've already polymorphed a couple of times, we have some big creatures out, then we'd love to deal 5 damage to every creature and just clear out a board. More than likely, we're going to have plenty of ways to make more tokens for polymorph targets. So, even though that would be a downside, I don't think it's one that hurts us too much with this deck. Next, we'll look at Prosperous Partnership for 1, a red and a white. This is an enchantment, and when it enters, you create 2 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Here we see those citizen tokens again. And then it also has an activated ability, tap 3 untapped creatures you control, create a treasure token. I really love this being in the deck because along with Breya, we immediately have enough creatures to be making a treasure token on our turn, and because we are going to sometimes draw these big creatures with these big casting costs, we want to have that flexibility to just use our token army here to make more and more mana and help us cast anything that's wound up in our hand that maybe would have been a little bit better off in our deck, but this gives us the flexibility to do that. We're going to be making tokens, so having to tap 3 at a time, really not that big a deal. 3 creatures at a time, it's just not going to be a problem in this deck. And Breya and her tokens alone are going to give us 3 to start working with it right away. All right, our last example here is Storm Chaser's Talent. This one is a little bit different because it's not providing as much of this morph fodder, but I really like the other two abilities, and if you can get to the level 3 on here, then it can provide us more than just that one token. But let's go ahead and read the card. So when Storm Chaser's Talent, for a blue, this is an enchantment class. If you don't remember what this is from, we've had a few sets now with these enchantments. Basically, you can pay the activated or the cost of these activated level abilities, and it will gain a level and those abilities as you pay for them. So, when Storm Chaser's Talent enters, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. So that's kind of the baseline ability. We obviously just want to get tokens on the board, so for 1 mana, that's a pretty good deal. For 3 and a blue, you can activate this level up to level 2, and when this class becomes level 2, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. For 5 and a blue, you can go to level 3 whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. Create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. So just like that first ability, but now we're doing it every time we cast an instant or sorcery. The reason I like this so much is that we have plenty of polymorph effects in the deck, but there's not as much of a concentration of them as you're going to see in a theme that's just super synergistic, where you have tons of cards you can add to the deck. We'll look at elves for an example. An elf deck can have easily 30 or 40 elves. We don't have that many polymorph cards. We probably have about 12 to 15. And so if we can get this down and get one of them back, then it's going to let us use it twice. And that's, it's just really valuable in some strategies. And this is definitely one of them. So yeah, really like Storm Chaser's Talent, really good fit in the deck. All right, and the last category we're going to look at, this is just an example of some of the polymorph cards. And again, I wanted to highlight that you can use these to be more than just straightforward, we're going to polymorph our own creatures. We've got some modality here. That's not the only thing that we can do. We can also kind of roll the dice. If we have just a superimposing creature on an opponent's board, we could try to get that off the board and hope that they flip into something that is a little less threatening, which, if you pick the right targets, it's pretty likely. Let's look first at Chaos Mutation for 3, a blue and a red. This is an instant. Exile any number of target creatures controlled by different players. For each creature exiled this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. They put that card onto the battlefield and then put the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order. All right, so I don't think I'm going to read all of the polymorph kind of parts of the effects, because that's what they do. You're going to get a creature off the board, and then you're going to flip cards from generally the owner's library until you flip over another creature, and that will enter the battlefield. So Chaos Mutation, again, we can have as many targets as we have opponents and ourselves. So, for 5 mana, we could be putting in a lot of work here. We could be potentially exiling, 3 or 4 creatures, I would think, at minimum. And if we're getting our opponent's best creature off the board to do that, then it's probably worth the risk of them flipping into something good, because we have stacked our deck. We know we're going to flip into something good. All right, the next one is going to be Divergent Transformations for 6 and a red. This is an instant with Undaunted, so it costs 1 less for each opponent that we have. Exile 2 target creatures, and then for each of those creatures, we're going to do that polymorph effect. This one shuffles the libraries instead of putting the cards back on the bottom. But, being able to cast this for 4, because we're going to reduce that cost pretty much every game, that's pretty great. And the fact that those are both instant speed just gives us lots of flexibility with when we do this. And if we want to do it in reaction to something, we can do that. But yeah. And I also like that this one can exile 2 target creatures. It can be 2 of our creatures. If we have 2 tokens out, then, being able to polymorph at instant speed right before our turn can be pretty huge, because obviously we have some attack triggers and we have some creatures that want to be getting in for damage right away. All right, next we have Mass Polymorph. This might be my favorite card in the deck because of the just crazy plays that this can enable. But for 5 and a blue, we're going to exile all creatures we control and then reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal that many creature cards, and then we'll do the polymorph thing and put them into the battlefield. Put them onto the battlefield, excuse me, and then shuffle the rest into our library. So this one is obviously a little bit risky. You know, there's always a chance that we have a really good polymorph target out already, and we'd have to give that up. But, you know, if we have this in our hand, we can play a little bit more aggressively with those creatures. You know, maybe try to get them into our graveyard just so that they're still around. They don't get exiled. Generally, though, it's not that big a deal because we're going to be giving up, you know, maybe 1 or 2 of our polymorph targets to get hopefully 3, 4, maybe even 5. And for 6 mana, that's a pretty good deal. All right, next is Proteus Staff for 3. Generic mana. This is an artifact, and it has an activate ability that is 2 and a blue, and tapping it, you put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. That creature's controller then basically does the polymorph effect, and when it's done, you put the revealed cards that weren't creatures on the bottom of that library. So this one is fantastic because we can use this as a way to control our opponent's boards in addition to polymorphing our own stuff. But obviously, you know, being able to do it for 2 and a blue each turn cycle and just have a repeatable effect. Once we can get a Bitter Blossom in play, you know, some kind of maybe a Symbol of the Legion, some kind of way to be making token creatures every upkeep. This just kind of gets out of hand quickly. So, all right, that's the deck, guys. Just wanted to kind of keep this one short and sweet if possible. You know, again, polymorph is kind of one of those jankier themes, but I just love the plays that this enables and just kind of the potential that it sets up in this deck. So as always, if you want to see the deck, we have an Architect link there at the bottom left. I'm still waiting on YouTube to let me put my external links in the description, but as soon as I can do that, I will also be doing that for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to help the channel out, you can always like the video or subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thanks so much for sticking around, and keep playing Commander.